You had an interesting time with our friends on The View talking about COVID. You got a lot of attention for that one.
I did.
It seems like years past, we're still divided by this plague that took 1 million souls from us.
We're divided because of how people feel. I don't really care how people feel. I barely care how I feel. What I care is what is. What are the facts? What does science tell us, and what are the facts? That's what I care about. I'm launching this new network, April 2nd, Merritt Street Media. Name wasn't chosen at random, by the way.
Yeah,
Merritt Street Media.
Please.
Because I think this country was built on a meritocracy. You work hard, bring value to the table, you get rewarded for it. I think that's a real building block of this country. And I care what the facts are. And when I hear people say, well, I feel, well, okay, great. It has nothing to do with what happened, how you feel. Let's look at the facts about what happened and what people did and why they did it. And the good thing about the passage of time is you don't have to speculate, you can measure. You don't have to project, you don't have to speculate, you can just measure. And, I said some things at the beginning of the quarantine that said this quarantine, if it goes on like it seems to be doing, is going to create more harm to the children than the virus ever will. And people looked at me like I was insane and said so. And I said, well, we'll see. And that's exactly what happened. And I'm still waiting for them to call back and say, well, I guess you weren't insane. Sorry.
You think the restrictions, the safety measures caused more harm than the virus that killed 1 million Americans?
To children, yes. I didn't say to Americans. I said to children, to school children. Shutting down the schools when the children were experiencing the highest levels of anxiety, depression, loneliness, yanking their support system out from under them when they were not susceptible to life-threatening reactions to this virus, means that they suffered more from the quarantine they would ever have than they ever would have had from the virus. That's a fact.
Children being asymptomatic doesn't mean they can't be carriers. One of the concerns was that these kids would pass the virus to each other and then bring it home to their families, often with multi-generational family members living in the homes, to say nothing of the school faculty and staff. It was all about harm reduction, wasn't it? People went too far in some cases, sure, but it was all in an attempt to preserve life.
Well, we seem to keep the hospitals open and running. We seem to keep the grocery stores open and running. We seem to keep the porn shops open and running.
Thank God for that.
We seem to keep an awful lot of essential services open and running, but not the schools.
Well, we had school. We had hybrid. My child missed 3 months of the 1 year, and then the next year it was half and half. And it was inconvenient. It was frustrating. It was hard for kids, no doubt. Every kid I know had their development leveled off at some place, but we as a species were doing our best to look out for each other. There was a lot of fear here in New York. 1 out of every 243 New Yorkers died. People were just doing their best, and you could make the argument that it was about trying to protect all of us.
We had more information than we were using in terms of keeping these children safe. When they shut the schools down, that means that children that were being abused at home, being molested at home, were no longer being seen by mandated reporters. Teachers, counselors, coaches, cafeteria workers, bus drivers. Referrals to the Department of Child and Family Services, Child Protective Services, dropped in some cases as much as 50, 60, 70%. Do you think that the abuse and molestation dropped 50, 60, 70%, or do you think it just stopped getting reported because we didn't have eyes on those children? Do you think it dropped because we sent them home and locked them up with their abusers with nobody to have an eye on them and report that to protect them? I think it's the latter, not the former.
Of course.
We abandoned those children to their abusers and locked them up in isolation where there was additional frustration. And we owed those kids a higher duty of care than that.